Why isn't there a master compressor? Does the SYNTAKT have an ARP? There should be sample-based tracks on the SYNTAKT. The SYNTAKT is basically a beefed-up model cycles. Well, today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to answer some of your questions that you left on my review about the SYNTAKT. I went with the top upvoted ones as well as some of your hot takes. I thought that this could be a bit of fun. I hope it's not a terrible idea. So let's start with a comment from Discord. Can you set the 3 analog tracks to the dual VCO machine and make like a 6 oscillator machine? And the short answer is yes, you can. You can take the dual VCO and load it into multiple tracks and get yourself sort of a 6 oscillator monophonic synthesizer. If you set any of the tracks to receive on the same MIDI channel, you can play it and you can also record simultaneously into the 3 tracks. And like I said, if you tune them, you can get some chords and you can actually play them from a MIDI keyboard. Just a very quick demonstration. I'm sorry that I can't just create a banger on the fly every single time, not even half of the time, but you get the idea. You can create chords using the 3 analog VCOs. You could basically use any of the digital synths in the same way. I'm just sending from the MIDI keyboard to all 3 tracks at once. Is this practical? It's doable, it's not super practical. What I'd like to see, and I brought this up in my review, is a way to play multiple machines polyphonically or a real polyphonic machine. I don't think we'll get this, but it would make the device even better. Does the SYNTAKT have an ARP? No, it doesn't, and I wish I'd brought this up more and put more emphasis on this in my review video, because it would be a great addition to this machine. If we take a look under the trig page, you can see that there's some empty space there, so I feel like they could put an arpeggiator there. I'm a bit confused about the polyphony bit. So it has a chord mode, but can't be played polyphonically outside of that mode, not even with a keyboard. The SYNTAKT is a 12-voice synth, but all voices can only be played monophonically, and I bring this up in my review. The chord machine is basically a bunch of oscillators tuned in different intervals, and that way you get a static chord. You can create sort of movement to the chord by setting an LFO to the oscillator balance, but that's just a neat trick and doesn't change the fact that all tracks are essentially monophonic. Here I'm controlling the synth chord's oscillator balance using an LFO, and we also have some amp panning going on. Why isn't there a master compressor? Well, I don't know, and I personally don't miss it, but I can totally see Electron implementing this in a future update. I think it's quite clever to hold a few updates in reserve to make for good PR in the future, but these are just speculations. I have no insight and no idea about the SYNTAKT roadmap. I'm excited about this groovebox, but I can't believe that they didn't make it USB-C and battery-powered in 2022. Such a missed opportunity to make this the ultimate groovebox. Yes, USB-C and battery-powered would have been really good. I think for any future product line, they totally should add at least ability to battery power over USB. I think that this hits a really good niche in the market for people who feel like the AR is too expensive and aren't so interested in the Digitakt sampling or the Digitone's tonal stuff. I agree. It gives you a more traditional groovebox experience. No workaround using samples as oscillators, just straight up sound creation and sound processing, and it's also a little bit of an easier workflow than the analog rhythm. It's weird. Out of all the Electron boxes, this is the least attractive one to me, but it still seems cool. I don't know. Maybe I just like my gear more focused. This is a common comment, and I agree. It's a bag with different things from other Electron machines and a few new novel things. For example, the FX track it's quite different from the analog rhythm. It's not just taken straight from the rhythm. It sounds different, it operates differently. It's a little bit more feature-packed in some ways. And weirdly, I think that it really works, but it also makes it less exciting if you already have, say, a Cycles and a Digitact. I can see why it's not exciting to you. In opposition to this, another viewer wrote, "It's probably better suited for me than the Digitact, as I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to loading samples or sampling from audio input." And I'm a bit like that myself. I also want to take a step back and remember that disappointment is natural when a brand we have high expectations of releases something. Do you remember the Model Samples launch or the Model Cycles launch? There was a lot of negativity then too. And a few years later, when I in a video said that the Model Samples just wasn't my favorite piece of gear, I didn't really like it that much. I also don't think it's really up there with the Digitact. People were telling me I was wrong because over the course of time, a lot of people had started to like the Model Samples. Affordable and does the job well. So in my world, initial impressions rarely stand the test of time. Over time it shifts. Drum Brute was very popular at launch, affordable analog drum machine, and now it's not as popular, not because it's bad gear, because it really isn't, but because there's more alternatives out there that sound different or even better, just have a sound that more people enjoy. My friend and fellow YouTuber Matt Greer wrote, "I think Electron has a real winner here. Unfortunately, between the 8 other of their machines I own, ridiculous, I know, it doesn't really bring anything new to my studio, but there's a lot to like here. Firstly, go and check out Matt Greer's YouTube channel, it's linked down below. And secondly, Electron gear isn't Pokemon, you don't have to catch them all. There's overlap between different products, and I think that once you have a few Electron machines, you might feel pretty content." I feel like this is a groove box that will attract a lot of newcomers and will sell well, but perhaps not appeal to some of those who have been producing for quite some time. I both agree and disagree. I agree that it's a great place to start for newcomers. It's probably my first recommendation now if you want to get into the Electron ecosystem of products, but I disagree that it's not for more advanced producers. It's like a light version of the analog rhythm with some digital sound engines that you can run through analog effects. It's also a standalone effects box for analog processing, so I think there's a lot to like here if you're a more advanced user. Interesting sounds, but I really want a 16-track Digitact. One can only dream. Yeah, I think we can dream about that one, but I also think it's highly unlikely. What I personally really enjoy is a combo between Digitact and say Analog 4, sampling and polyphonic analog synthesis. Now that's something that I would pay a lot of money for, just having like this digital and analog sampling hybrid groove box. That'd be a lot of fun. There should be sample-based tracks on the SYNTAKT, and honestly, that's not a bad idea. That could be really cool. There's a few problems though. It doesn't have storage. There's not like a plus drive, at least not in the documentation that I could find. So there's no like 1 GB of sampling storage on the unit. And I don't know about RAM, but yes, it would be really cool if one or more tracks could be turned into sample playback tracks, but I don't think that'll happen. The SYNTAKT is basically a beefed up Model Cycles. Well, yeah, it is. If you discount the 4 analog rhythm-like voices, the stereo effects processor with drive, amp, envelope LFOs, and analog stereo filter, and the digital modules that aren't on the cycle, and the bigger screen, and the Digitact workflow, then yeah, then it's a beefed up Model Cycles. It's not worth 1,000 euros. Now, whether it's worth it for you, I can't really answer that. I got this one from Electron. I'm in a totally different situation. Let's just all acknowledge that. I can't tell you whether to buy this or not. I can just, as honestly as I can, inform you about what this is and what it can do and can't do, and you have to make your own mind, because it's a lot of money and you should always think carefully about where you spend it. Now, Digitact is somewhere between $800 and $850 currently. That's higher than it was when it was released. And prices on all equipment are going up due to the state of the world economy. These are just facts. Another fact is that Digitact is 8 sample channels and 8 MIDI channels. The SYNTAKT is 12 voices total, 4 of which are analog. It has the analog effects engine, effects track. You can use it as an analog stereo effects processor as well. So there's a lot more going on here than on the Digitact, but for the money, You could almost get a Machina Plus or some sort of MPC, which are way more versatile, also very different kinds of instruments. $1,000 is a lot of money, and you should be careful where you spend the money, and you should do your research, and definitely don't just buy it because I'm hyped about it. I'd probably be hyped if Electron released a hat, and I don't even wear hats. An Electron sandal though, that'd be total fire, and I'd buy that instantly. So that about covers it. I commented on some of your comments, and hopefully you learned something new about the SYNTAKT, maybe about my perspective on it. Take what I say with a grain of salt. You know, I'm just one person. You can have your opinion about this device. It doesn't really matter to me what gear you use. The most important thing is that you pick something up that is good for you, that works for you, and hopefully my videos can help inform you about the workflow, about how these devices function. That is my aim. That is what I'm here for. That is what I want to do for you, and hopefully I succeed in that. So thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you all later.